You came to the darkness for knowledge.
Yes.
Hello Crusaders, Dash here, and today I rewatched the Diablo 4 cinematic at 0.25 speed and found 17 new details you may or may not have seen before, but I can guarantee some of these details in the video are going to blow your mind. So please make sure to watch till the end, and without further ado, let's portal into the first fact. Kicking things off is my favorite catch, which is actually from the very end of the cinematic. In the final scene, Lilith hovers before a reverent summoner, soon touching down as he kneels before her, and our very last detail comes into view after his declaration to her.
Blessed Mother.
The iris color of her eyes, which has fast become Lilith's defining attribute, but her mismatched heterochromia we've seen in the artwork hasn't always been this way. It actually deviates significantly versus her appearance originally in the Sin War novels that describe her as having orbs of black with just a glint of red. And we've also briefly seen a flash of Lilith's original form pre-banishment in the cinematic at 7 minutes 36 seconds momentarily. Interestingly, the two forced participants, the Brute and the Thief, both appear to have eye colors that are close to matching Lilith's own mix of colors. Now, on screen, what you're seeing is concept art, and a lot of the concept art has been changed, so I believe the Thief's eyes may have been changed from green to blue, though it is incredibly difficult to see due to the darkness that they're surrounded by at almost all times. But would it not make sense that Lilith reborn as a Frankenstein of flesh, and that possibly an amalgam of the two adventurers' eyes make up her own dread-inducing visage whilst on Sanctuary? Number 2, moving back to the start of the cinematic, as we're going to do things much more linear from now. Our first observation comes from the opening shot where we see an unnamed town. Now, there has been speculation on the location of the ritual to summon Lilith. The one thing we do know is there is light dawning on a Zakarum cross. Now, this cross is prevalent throughout the cinematic and is also seen littered about in various media, from the gameplay trailer, lore panel screen, the Blood Bishop enemy, and even in-game death screen features a variant. Now, needless to say, Blizzard featuring it throughout the game and at BlizzCon's showcase no less, it is not only an extremely important symbol, but also a brand new design for Diablo 4, and it has been indicated the reason behind the original Zakarum crosses not being shown in-game. As we saw, the Zakarum cross in Diablo 1 and 2 mirrored that more of a Christian cross. In Diablo 3, the Crusaders similarly used the Greek Psi symbol, however, the traditional cross appeared briefly on a Crusader shield in Diablo Issue 1 before it was completely removed. And this is, according to creative director Sebastian Stepien, reflective of a more agnostic way of viewing Sanctuary. The developers took inspiration from how Hell was viewed in the Middle Ages and transported this mindset into the game itself. This will make sense in later facts as we see the cross take on a more hellish twist in the cinematic. And also, as an aside, the light hits the cross and we see the design work, which is actually reminiscent of Celtic knotting that points to a location in the northern area of the eastern continent, likely between Glen and the Fractured Peaks, and the snow-covered mountains being potentially indicative of this. Third up, the biggest calls on the surface level can be seen inside the church. It's there we see, although hard to make out, the priest toppled upon the altar, which bears striking resemblance to the priests of the Triune, wearing the same style of robes as even Lilith's cult of personality. Thanks to the official concept art being released, we do get to see this statue in full, and it does have an interesting tidbit outside of the outfit. The priest's hand is making a blessing sign, and upon closer inspection, looks similar to that of Baphomet's signature hand gesture. It's likely that a lot of the symbology that Baphomet directly holds actually was used in this cinematic, as we see a lot of pentagrams, which we will discuss soon, and the two snakes coming together like the caduceus on his belt. Number 4, after the scene in the church, we cut immediately to the catacombs diagrams below in which 4 adventurers are therein. It was confirmed by Blizzard in an article about the adventurers' design. They were purposefully created to represent a real 4-man party as if played in-game, with the archetypes of the swordsman, priest, thief, and barbarian, though only one of those classes is confirmed thus far. However, there's a direct fact about this party that was also confirmed later and easily missable due to her superhuman build and gruff voice, that the barbarian is of female persuasion.
Came here for treasure. What is this place? I don't know.
Number 5. Another curious meld of symbolism is briefly seen as the adventurers, guided by torchlight, make their way across a stone floor marked by a large circular seal bearing a rather strong resemblance to a sketch in the book Art of Diablo, labeled Sketch of Symbol of Tyrael, the Archangel, but with several markings making it much closer to those owned by the Triune, and later confirmed to be directly related to summoning. Number 7. As the swordsman goes to join the others in their fight against the ghouls, which hides its own mysterious tell. Even though scimitar weapons like this are very iconic to weaponry used in the desert areas in most works of fiction, curiously, this swordsman chooses a crossguard, being twin snakes facing 2 opposing directions, in balance with one another. And of course, later, the swordsman is revealed to be the Pale Man, his true identity deeply entrenched with symbolism of snakes in particular, as his original artwork bears the symbol of the caduceus twin snakes, which I've explored in previous videos, which will be linked in the description. Number 8. Afterwards, the priest begins to decipher the script on the door, gazing upon the markings. Now, the symbols make up large horned creature, but interestingly enough, and I'm not trying to be funny about this, but just looking at these markings above the horns, I've been in a debate with the lore master Tails, says that he thinks it looks like a female reproductive system, which would absolutely make sense considering the focus of the cinematic is to quote-unquote rebirth Lilith onto the mortal plane by passing her through a bloody membrane to give her flesh, and given that she's also referred to later as Blessed Mother, this sort of maternal birthing is very relatable in its symbology. My personal Rorschach interpretation of the picture was that the 3 sacrifices were represented in the orbs and that was Lilith's headdress below, symbolizing the way of her return or the key to bringing her back. Who do you agree with, if either? Let us know your interpretation in the comments below or join us on Discord for that lovely debate. Number 9. As the priest examines the symbols on the floor of the Hermetic Key, symbols on the hands somewhat resemble that of the Mage clans. Affiliation aside, this seems like a very minor point. Maybe it's a tad silly, like, of course there was something there, but it happened so fast that I assumed that the pyramids inside the hands were just very sharp. But no, there's actually a needle that juts out in the middle to act as the blood letter. Number 10. We briefly see on the priest definitely what appears to be a cross of the Zakarum, which begs the question, with all the Zakarum symbology about, did they indeed build a church atop a triune site as a means of burying or containing the dark powers therein for safeguard, much like the Horodrim did with the Black Soulstone? Number 11. As the priest's hand comes down on the Hermetic Key, we see that the hand indentation is much larger than an average human hand, which also leaves us the question, could this be because the carving is purely symbolic and wants to make sure that your hand is going to get the blood, or could it possibly be in case someone much larger than an average human initiated the ritual, such as the Nephilim? The humans' original forebears were said to be much larger than an average human, and if it is an ancient temple, therefore it makes sense that the hand spacing would be larger too. Number 12. Inside the summoning chamber, as the priest comes after the thief, insisting that they abandon their actions, we see very closely the means in which the thief attacks the priest in return. Blood on 2 outstretched fingers denotes the thief's assaulting the wound in the priest's torso, hitting a weak point to inflict greater pain upon his target, and all shortly before we hear the voice of the swordsman. Number 13. As the swordsman sets about his work, sending the thief and the brute up to the columns, and as markings begin to form on their forehead and down to their torso of the first captives, we see markings that weren't there prior. though it should be noted later, the priest who represented the blood of the willing was spared the slashes on his face, and we see in the final reflection of the glazed over gaze of the priest, his face remains unblemished by the markings, unlike his two other companions. Speaking of true forms, when the Pale Man assumes his true form, which, although a cool factoid picked up in the official subtitles, revealed his name was simply Magnus, it's not something that you actually see in the video or at 0.25 speed. However, we shall refer to him as Magnus through the remainder of the video, or the Pale Man interchangeably. Number 14. Upon closer inspection, we see Magnus's shawl is bound together by the telltale pentagram. Although Diablo 4 is confirmed to move away from Christian crosses, it doesn't shy away from the pentagram symbol, which is usually associated with the devil. The pentagram was once associated directly with the Lord of Terror himself. In Diablo 2, it was shown on the ground in his fight in Hell. However, this has been somewhat retconned, as with the release of the Art of Diablo, it's shown to be the official emblem of Andariel, the Maiden of Anguish, one of two lesser evils confirmed to be alive and present in Diablo 4. Number 15, now we get to zoom in on the famous cut-off pinky. When we return to look on Magnus's face and he tells the priest,
"Oh, I just came here for knowledge."
They're coming!
I know.
the look on his face and vocal tone was that of sympathy, as if he understood the journey the priest is undergoing. And now we look at Magnus as he speaks to the priest, uttering to him the same words of coming to darkness for knowledge.
You came to the darkness for knowledge.
There is that look of understanding on Magnus's face as he gazes at the priest, held aloft by the Pale Man's telekinesis, though he remains unharmed. Not only his face, but he was the willing. Now this speaks volumes about the theory that the Pale Man, or Magnus, is actually the Tall Man, spoken of in the D3 item, the Tall Man's Finger, which reads, "This finger was severed from the hand of an Umburu priest who crossed over to the unformed lands in search of knowledge and came back changed. Before the unclean phantasm was finally slain, he evinced great power over the dead, and this metal-plated digit still possesses some of that power." This was actually a shout to the Phantasm movie series and not Rathma as many have speculated.
Now you die.
Phantasm. Come.
Number 16, the director also took extra care to emphasize the two of them seeing eye to eye on the matter, not just seeing each other, but almost like looking in a mirror, while still staying true to the subtle changes in expression in Magnus's face, and that Magnus, much larger than a normal man, is most likely himself of Nephilim origin, as the firstborn of Lilith was said to be much taller than average man and therefore ancient in age, which is what has sprung forth many of the Rathma theories, which we will find out later, but it should be of note. All we know right now is that size seems to matter. Number 17, the next flash we see while Lilith pushes her way into the void is that what has to be the skull of Diablo himself. However, this is actually difficult to place in the timeline, as during Diablo 3, the primeval possessed horns that jagged up versus the more ram-like horns in nature that have been portrayed previously. And the Diablo last scene in the universe was shown to dissolve into ash upon being defeated by the Nephilim, leaving no remnant of a skull behind. Back to the image, we see several turned over Zakharum crosses. Now this was a callback previously mentioned, as Satanists in real life bear an upside down Christian cross. Perhaps too the Triune or factions of Hell do the same to the new Zakharum crosses in game. Maybe this is a rating choice to stay away from the Christian crosses, and so it's easier to show more hellish things, but why would they use the pentagram, and why has this not been an issue previously? Also, the robed cultists appear to be akin to what we've seen several times in this video. Then finally, Lilith emerges of blood and sinew, and we glimpse her hand reaching out before the shot changes to Magnus joining hands with her, focused on his 4-digit hand as he swears fealty to her, his pinky, of course, capped in a metal-plated digit. Sound familiar? Speaking of sounding familiar, can we talk about how watching the video at quarter speed sounds like a Mass Effect Reaper at the very beginning? Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, and a huge shout out to the Canadian lad and his 0.25 speed series that inspired me to follow the formula on gaming. I'll leave the movies to him and a link to his channel down in the description. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, traveler.